I think, yeah, this year was weird. I think this year in totality, we could probably agree there wasn't a lot of like huge upsets this year, like as a whole, right? There were a few,
Yeah.
but like previous years, like last year, remember the last couple of weeks of last year? I mean, there was top 10, like that one week, I swear, like 6 of the top 10 teams lost in one weekend.
Yeah.
Like it was nuts. But no, overall though, man, like I said, good football. Some really good games, some really good teams played. I like I said, as a college football fan, and that's what I am. I was thoroughly pleased.
I agree with you, man. It's yeah, it was a great weekend. You know, we go back to that Oregon-Washington game. That game definitely lived up to the hype. You know, obviously this was a terrible week for me picking. I think, you know, it wasn't your best week either, but I definitely shit the bed because I picked some upsets to happen. But started with Oregon and Washington. Washington cemented themselves, I think, in the playoffs starting Friday night. You had this thing called Liberty versus New Mexico State, which was a pretty good game. It was a shootout, if you like that.
It was. Hats off to Liberty, by the way. Undefeated season. They're actually one of the undefeated teams left. So
exactly
13-0. So good for them. And Shadwell, that's a good coach. I think he'll be coaching probably at a Power 5 school here shortly, I would assume.
Absolutely. But you know what? We're gonna address this head on here. You know, Georgia, what happened? We're supposed to be the best with the best coach, Nick Saban. Should y'all, who's still king of SEC football? Well, you know, listen. There's a lot of things in life, Gator Swag, that I'm thankful for. And it's like I told Chris when we got on here. Number one, I'll just say grammar. You know, the Lord bless me with that because it was showed y'all. I know you were excited. You've been waiting up all night to comment that, and I'm glad that, you know, you can live vicariously through other SEC teams as a Florida fan. I mean, it's like a make-a-wish. You know what I mean? Almost. You get to watch somebody else win a championship every year, and I think it's awesome. But with that being said, here's the thing, right? At some point, Georgia was going to lose, and for whatever reason, it's kind of like, you know, there's just certain teams that mentally, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. Like Washington and Oregon, right? I think Oregon was the better team, but Washington just owns them. They lived rent-free in their head, and they beat them. They came out and beat them. And Georgia, for whatever reason, when they play Alabama, now that makes Kirby 5-1 against Nick Saban. That doesn't mean we're going to fire him. I think that just means you got to hope he retires sometime soon, by God. Leave some room for everybody else.
Yeah. I'll add to this. You know, I'm not a Georgia fan, but I don't think people truly appreciate what Georgia's done, though, than the last 3 years. There isn't a goddamn soul on planet Earth that's a fan of college football that wouldn't give their left arm to do what Georgia's done. There's only been a handful of teams that have ever done what they've done, and they had to lose sometime, right? You can't win them all. 29 straight is insane, especially in the world of college football that we live in. And we said it. I said this like one of the very first podcasts we did. There is probably 80% of the country was waiting for this day to happen. It's not even necessarily because you hated Georgia. It's just like the Patriots effect in the NFL, right? I'm a Dolphins fan. Nick Saban, or not Nick Saban, but Bill Belichick beat me for 20 years. I was so sick of them winning, Tom Brady winning titles and all that. I just hated the Patriots because I'm tired of seeing them win. There was a lot of people out there just wanted to see Georgia finally get beat. And it happened. And like I said, Bama was the better team yesterday. They were. And Bama's took a lot of strides forward, Christian, since week 4, week 5 of this season. I think Nick Saban's done probably the best coaching job, maybe in his whole tenure at Alabama with this team. He ain't got a lot to work with, in my opinion, over there. Not like some of the other teams he had with Jalen Hurts and Tua and those receivers, and back in the day with Richardson and Mark Ingram and all those teams and great defenses. Hats off to Alabama yesterday. That was a good football game. Hats off to Georgia, too, in 29 straight.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, we were touching on it a little bit in this game, and it's weird when you haven't lost, like Chris said, in 29 straight games, like in almost 2 years. You just don't know how to react almost. It's a weird thing because you're not used to losing. It's like being really good at something and then just you know, all of a sudden the rug gets pulled from you. But, you know, here's the thing. I think hats off to Alabama. They far exceeded expectations this year, and, you know, hats off to them. As far as the Dogs are concerned, you know, we'll touch into this game a little bit, you know, here in a second. But this might be the best thing to happen to Georgia, right? Because eventually you got to lose. And I think the way they lost this game and, the fact that they're probably not going to get in the playoffs, to me, well, not probably, they're not getting in the playoffs. But to me, this is going to be more fuel for next year. They're going to get better. They're going to reload, and it'll be interesting to see what they do. Now, they got to look, if anything, the transfer portal has showed me in the first couple days, the first week of it being like fully active, is some people are going to leave the program. I'm not going to say that they're not. But it'll be interesting to see what Georgia pulls and what ends up happening over the next couple months there. As far as this game is concerned, I think Mike Bobo, that opening drive looked beautiful. Alabama made adjustments. And then from there, I just feel like Bobo kind of kept running the same script. He kept trying to get the ball out and attack on the edges, and Bama was just, they were not having it. They kept trying to toss the ball in key short yardage situations, and Bama they contained us all game. They just contained us. And in that situation, you just run the ball downhill, right? Get the 2 yards you need. And they did it a couple times, and it worked a couple times. As far as Bama's concerned, look, Jalen Milroe is a magician back there. He's got that one ability, and I always say this, if you want to beat Georgia, you got to have an athletic quarterback that can move the pocket. If you're just going to drop back and try to throw the ball and be more traditional, Georgia will eat your lunch all day. Chris, I'll throw it to you. We got people talking about, Bama's getting in the playoffs. Maybe they're not. I mean, what do you think?
No, they're not. How do you leave out a team that went 13-0 in FSU this year? They beat LSU handily, by the way. That game wasn't even close in the second half. I know it was week 1. Do I think Florida State's one of the top 10 teams in the country? I actually don't. I think Missouri, Ole Miss, there's other teams, Oregon would beat them. But Bama had their chance to run the table. They lost to Texas. That's why Texas is going to get in. They got the better win. I also think, how do you discredit FSU? This is going to piss off a lot of people today, I think, when this comes out. But Florida State deserves to be in. You got to credit the regular season. There's a reason why it's played. We don't just play. We don't play it on paper. If that's the case, then why even have a regular season then? So I think you're crazy, Gator Swag. If you think FSU is not going to get in, unfortunately, I don't think this will be the first time an SEC school doesn't get in. Do I agree with it? I told Christian today that I think Alabama and Georgia, they're 2 of the best 4 teams in the country. That's my personal opinion. But unfortunately, because the way the season ended with Georgia getting knocked off here and Bama getting beat week 4 or 5 against Texas at home by 10, not just a touchdown, by 10, that does matter. Scores matter. I don't think they get in. I mean, Florida State, how do you discredit a 13-0 Florida State team with their 3rd string quarterback?
Oh, I absolutely agree. If this was okay, if you had Washington with a loss, you know what I mean, or Michigan or any of these, you have 3 teams that are undefeated conference champions in Michigan, Washington, and FSU. Yeah, at Florida State, I'm going to be honest with you, they didn't look like, they weren't lights out because they had a 3rd string quarterback making his first start, you know what I mean, in a neutral site championship game, and they didn't look great on offense. Take that away. Their defense looked pretty damn good last night, though.
Looked awesome.
I mean, they were feasting and they were taking advantage of Louisville, almost all night. So, to me, you take all that into consideration. I think, to me, this is how I would rank it: Michigan, Washington, Florida State, and then Texas in there at number 4. Is probably how I would end up ranking it if it was me. Now, what's the committee going to do? Right? Are they going to leave the SEC out? I don't know, because it's so subjective. It's like Heisman voting almost, right? One year they look at stats. One year they look at who's the best player on the best team. Almost, in a way, right? It's so subjective that it just is really hard to predict what they're going to do. If I was putting money on it, I would probably say, again, in that order, because, you look at 3 spots are probably locked in with Michigan, Washington, and Florida State, right? Because here's the other side of it. The committee had every opportunity going into this, right, Chris, to downgrade Florida State when they lost Travis, to downgrade Texas, over Bama. But right now, the committee looks at it as Texas is better than Bama. So, and nobody else lost this weekend. So, nope. I find it very hard to see Bama getting in.
Yeah, I like I said, I do. I don't either. But like I said, do I think you want the best 4 teams in the country? Honestly, my 4 best teams in the country: Michigan, Washington, Alabama, and Georgia, in my opinion. But I don't think that's going to happen. You can't leave Florida State out. And I don't think the committee will leave Florida State out. I don't. I know this was talked about a lot yesterday depending on any game you were watching, how this was going to play out. And Florida State pulled off the win last night. Yeah, obviously if they lost, then nobody gets in from the ACC, and then you probably do get Bama in, right? But unfortunately, that's not what happened. I like I said, you can't discredit what Florida State did this year. You can say what you want about the ACC, but they went 13-0. They beat Florida, an SEC school, by the way, Gator Swag. They also beat LSU, an SEC school. They did what they needed to do, and I think Florida State deserves to get in. Do I think they're going to win the game in a playoff? No, I don't. And you made a comment, too, by the way, about TCU. TCU won a game in the playoffs last year. Anybody can beat anybody. It does happen. We've seen stranger shit happen in college football. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think they're going to get that Tate Rodemaker kid back. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I mean, again, that to me, like we were talking about it before we got on here, I would have loved to have seen Jordan Travis in the playoffs against Michael Penix. Dude, that would have been like an elite matchup, I feel like. Now, like I said, I think it'll still be a good matchup. I mean, I think Florida State's defense will be good, and I think, Tate Rodemaker, I think he'll be all right? But I don't know. That's going to be a pick'em game anyways.
I think Florida State, Benson's a good back, and I can't think of the other kid's name. If they can run the football and rely on great defense, you see it in the NFL with teams with little to no quarterback. Compete in the playoffs and even win Super Bowls. I'll say this too, by the way. We talked about Jalen Milroe. I don't think Jalen Milroe is an elite quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback. He's improved. You don't need a great quarterback to win a national title. I'll use Stetson Bennett. I don't think Stetson Bennett he didn't have elite level arm talent or anything like that. I think Carson Beck's actually a better quarterback. Who's to say that a third string or Rodemaker, I guess, will be playing a second string quarterback with a good defense, insulated around it with really good wide receivers, can't win a game? I think that's crazy. That's like I said, Christian, I agree with you 100% on this topic, man.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he said who would win, Alabama or FSU? Oh, 100% it would be Alabama. I think that's the other thing too. I mean, if Bama gets in, more than likely somebody's got to get left out, right? So that means we're leaving Texas out now too, because Texas beat the dog shit out of Oklahoma State yesterday, but somebody's getting left out that shouldn't get left out, and that's why I can't wait. But yeah, I agree. Bama, if Bama gets in, is it controversial to say they might run the table? I mean, because we were talking about it, I have no confidence in Michigan. You know what I mean? In the playoffs, regular season, they're the regular season champions. But in the playoffs against a team like Alabama that's been there before and has Nick Saban as the coach, I can't see a world where, like, if I'm Michigan, I'm praying for Texas or Florida State. I'm not praying for Bama.
Yeah, like I said, best thing I think for Michigan yesterday, I told you this earlier, Christian, was Georgia getting beat, because that was the one team I thought that could probably match up against Michigan. And I also think Alabama would play with Michigan. That's just my opinion, which we're obviously everybody's entitled to their own, but I'm with you, man. I actually think that who's to say that Alabama and Georgia wouldn't play in a national title if they both made it? That could have been a national title game yesterday in the SEC title. It could have been. I think those teams are very, very good football teams.
100%. Michigan versus Iowa, Chris. Moral victory for Iowa that it was only 26-0. I mean,
I watched most of this game, and I think we all knew that, Michigan was obviously the far superior team. I will say Iowa, one thing about Iowa, though, man, they play hard. They do, and they did a good job. This game was 10-0 at halftime. I thought, man, if they could have just get some points on the board, and then Michigan scored, 10 in the third there, and then Iowa had to really try to start throwing the ball, and we know how that works with your body double. It just doesn't. And it just didn't happen, man. And like I said, I still have some questions about Michigan. I do. And I got some questions about JJ McCarthy throwing the ball when they're going to have to play somebody here that can move the ball offensively. And they might have to, if they're down by 10 or down by 7 and it's close. So we're going to find out. That's why they do the playoffs. But hats off to Iowa, though. I have to say this real quickly, the Iowa fans. I hate Iowa. Obviously, I'm a Nebraska man, but 10-3 is nothing to scoff at, with an offense that was 10th worst in the country in points per game. So hats off to Iowa Hawkeyes. I'll leave it at that.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Then doesn't the second in the Big Ten normally end up playing the second in the SEC? So we're going to see Iowa playing Georgia. Is that right?
I think that's how that works out. I'm not exactly sure. Don't quote me on it, but wow.
I mean, I know we saw, what was it, Purdue versus LSU last year, and that was
my God,
66 to 3 or something crazy like that. I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, if that happens, that'll be an interesting game, to say the least.
Yeah, how many people would play in that game with Georgia? I don't think Brock Bowers would he? I mean, some of your guys that are NFL, ready, Carson Beck. I mean,
I don't know. Well, here's the thing about Beck. I don't know. Beck's kind of like Quinn Ewers in a way, right? Where he's in an interesting spot, especially if Ewers.
Is he only a junior?
Yeah.
Oh, he is. Okay, I thought he was.
Yeah,
I did not know that. Okay.
So he's got another year of eligibility yet. Hell, he might even have like 2 more years of eligibility because you know how they do all that stuff now. But I don't know, man. I think it would just be interesting to see what happens. What's Beck going to do? There was a lot of talk coming into this. I think if Georgia would have won and they lost in the playoffs, then maybe he declares for the NFL. I still feel like he's a damn good quarterback, but I still think he needs another year, right? I just think this year's class is too loaded for some of these guys to really go to the league if that's what you want to do, which a lot of people, if you're playing this level of college football, that's what they want to do.
Yeah, you said a really interesting point there about Carson Beck. I actually think for his benefit, just Georgia seems, one thing I love about Georgia is their players love playing for Georgia. That's why Brock Bowers came back. I told you the story about, everybody kind of knew that about how the NFL said, don't play after he's basically playing on one foot. And, he said, no, screw that. Don't plan on drafting me. Then I'm playing. I love Georgia. I love Kirby Smart. I love my teammates. I think Carson Beck's kind of the same way. I think he does come back because this class is loaded. He's not going to be the number 1 overall quarterback taken off the board if he comes out this year. He definitely could be next year. I think he'd have a shot. I actually think he wants to prove that he can win a national title there and do what Stetson Bennett did. So I actually do think he comes back next year because I wanted to say this about Georgia really quickly. I know this as a Nebraska fan because we won 3 out of 4. We won 2 in a row. And then 96, we got beat twice that year. And that was a totally different team, the 96 team, than the 94, 95. We lost a lot of pieces. Kind of like Georgia, right? You guys lost a ton off your defense from the 21, 22 teams. It's a different team. You know what I mean? And guess what we did in 97? We got Scott Frost ended up being our quarterback. It was his second year. His first year was 96. Gave him a year. Nebraska looked like ran the table in 97, split a title with Michigan. So I think Georgia could do the same thing. Get some of you guys played a lot of young guys this year. And I think Georgia with Carson Beck being back would be huge next year. And I would probably put Georgia in the top 3 easily starting the season off next year if Carson Beck comes back easily.
Yeah, like you said, there's a ton of guys with Georgia that are super young, but so is Bama. Bama's a really young team too. I mean, they're younger than Georgia. I feel like. I mean,
yeah, they got a lot of guys too.
Hats off to like I said, hats off to both of them though, man. I mean, like I said, at least it was a good game. It wasn't a blowout either way, and I think that's what we're just fans of football, right? Yes, I'm a Georgia fan. Yes, Chris is a Nebraska fan. Sometimes he won't admit it, but
it's tough.
Just he's got to hide in that closet sometimes, back there behind him. So no,
it's true.
But anyways, yeah. So hats off to Michigan. They did what they needed to do. Iowa got the moral victory yesterday. I mean, that game was 10-0 at halftime. Louisville, Florida State. Florida State's defense. We touched on it, Chris. Was it all right? And really here it doesn't really matter. Obviously, as they're 13-0 ACC champions, but. Was Louisville's offense last night that bad, or was Florida State's defense that good?
Both. I watched this whole game. This was an ugly game to watch because I have this huge problem about wide receivers and DBs dropping balls. I've never seen somebody drop passes by the Louisville receivers. Thrash last night, dropped balls. The defense had multiple interceptions. I mean, yes, they're not the easiest catches, but you got to make those in big games like this. And like I said, this is not discrediting Florida State and what they did. Their defense is awesome. That Curse kid they got, that number 5, he's got to be a top 5 draft pick. That kid I know is a stud. I talked about him earlier in the season. But Louisville blocks a punt at the end there. Inside the 5, Plummer played like shit, throws an interception, throws it right to the Florida State guy. Florida State goes down, scores. It's pretty much over. And it just Louisville had multiple opportunities to win this football game. They did. And
Yeah.
I don't think Louisville is an elite level team by any means, but yeah, I would kind of say it's both. Florida State's defense is good. We're going to find out how good if they do make the playoffs and get in. They're going to have to play somebody with an elite level offense. Then we're going to find out because you're going to have to score some points offensively if you're Florida State. You're going to have to score more than 16.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, you said it best. I mean, they're gonna have to be able to put up some points. I mean, you're gonna have to at least be able to. You're at least gonna have to be able to put up 30 points to have a shot to win. Speaking of a team that didn't struggle whatsoever to score points yesterday, Texas.
Oh my God.
Now, what about them Longhorns, Chris?
Yeah, this was a track meet from the word go. I know some people were. Christian was, took Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's a weird team though. You want to talk about one end of the spectrum to the other any given week. Oklahoma State is that team. I've watched them play several times this year. I've watched them play great against Oklahoma. And then yesterday against Texas, it was just out the gate. I had texted Christian right away and said, is defense optional over here? Because Texas had all day to throw. I think Quinn Ewers broke a bunch of Big 12 title game records yesterday. He had like 4 touchdowns, 400 yards. He had like 350 in the first half. Yeah. I'm going to kick it to you, Christian, here when we start talking about Texas and when they do make it into the playoffs here, what they're about.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, here's the thing, right? Like, Texas's offense looked really good yesterday, but also Oklahoma State's defensive, Oklahoma State, I don't think has a terrible defense. I think it was just their game plan coming into this one. I mean, every time a Texas receiver or running back caught the football yesterday, nobody was within 10 yards of them, which tells me, okay, they were running more zone concepts. They weren't really blitzing as much. And like you said, Ewers had all day to throw. He picked them apart in what looked like a 7-on-7 clinic. Actually, it looked like a 6-on-7 clinic where they didn't even have a full 7th man to even compete in it because, Texas, every time they caught the ball, 15 yards, 20 yards. I mean, they looked super explosive. Finally, Oklahoma State realized, hey, we need to run more man. We need to start blitzing. And when they did that, I mean, it slowed the onset, the onset down of it. I mean, they only scored 14 points in the second half. But by that point, I mean, that was all she wrote. On the offensive side of the ball, Oklahoma State kept trying to hit the big home run plays, I felt like, in that game. And they just needed to just keep it within them. They were running the ball, I felt like, pretty well, and they were also making some just simple throws. I mean, they were doing good, but they just I honestly think, look, Texas looked really good yesterday, but Oklahoma State also helped in that ass whooping, just with their game plan.
Yeah. No, you're right. We had the same thoughts. I know we were texting back and forth during that game, and like I said, I did take Texas into points, but it's just Texas is an interesting team. Their offense is really good. Partially though, they beat Alabama earlier in the year. Now this is months later now. How do they fare against some of these defenses that they're going to have to play maybe in this playoff? Whether it's Washington, whether it's Michigan, whoever it is. Can they stop some people, and can Quinn Ewers actually step up? Like I said, you said something about experience. Texas hasn't been to a playoff, have they? I don't think so.
No,
not. It's been a long. I mean, I know they won the last time they won the Big 12 title was 2009. You said something about experience to me this morning, Christian. That's one thing Michigan's got. This will be the 3rd time in a row they're playing in the playoff, right? Washington hasn't been there. It's kind of cool if you're a fan of football this year. There's a lot of different teams probably going to end up in this playoffs, but I don't know about Texas, man. I like the offensive weapons, but man, if they play a team like Michigan that's going to want to slow them down, they're going to grind it out on offense. Texas isn't going to get the ball back every couple minutes. And how does that fare out? I don't know, man. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I like you said it best, Chris. I mean, experience, right? I mean, right now, the most experienced team with it depends who they put in. If Bama gets in, and we can debate this till whatever, and then like on Tuesday or Monday, whenever they actually come out with it, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I feel like, right? Because if Texas has to play Michigan, I probably lean Michigan. If Bama plays Michigan, I'm probably going to lean Bama just because the experience factor. I mean, we see it almost every year, right, with Michigan getting in the playoffs and losing now. It seems like that's become like an annual tradition. I mean, they've done it the last 2 years. Okay, so it's today at noon. Okay, well, good. I don't know why I was thinking it was Monday. Maybe that was just
Today
the
at
dramatic.
noon. Yep.
As I said it, I kind of felt like, it feels like it would be on today. So good to know it's today. We don't have to wait very long. But yeah, I just think Texas. I mean, you said something good too, Chris. If Texas and Bama played each other right now, who would you lean
Bama.
to win that game? Bama, right? So Bama, to me, if they get in, they're the scariest team in that whole equation.
Yeah, like I said, we don't have to wait a couple more hours here to find out. Somebody is going to get left out of this thing, though, and it's going to piss some people off. And this is why, more than anything, they need to have a 12-team playoff. Thank God this is last year of the 4-team. I know we'll debate on the 13th team, next year and in years going forward. But this year would have been a perfect year to watch, like Bama, Georgia, Oregon still, I think, gets a chance. Hell yeah, I think you could throw Missouri in there. I do. I don't know why I like Mizzou. Maybe Arizona. Ohio State's definitely in. Maybe Penn State. I think this year I think there's a lot of parity. I really do between some of these teams. And I think it'd be very interesting to see it just played out, man, in true playoff, a format. And that would be awesome. But yeah, somebody's going to get left out today. I know. Like I said, Gator Swag seems to think that Bama's getting in. I don't. I think the committee will do the right thing and put Florida State in.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, just looking at all this right here, I mean, you would have had basically, I mean, Georgia wouldn't be number one. I don't know. Hypothetically speaking, I mean, we'll see what they do with this and everything like that today. But I mean, where would you put Georgia if this was next year in a 12-team playoff format? Where, I mean, with that loss to Bama, where would you end up putting them? They wouldn't be in the top 4, right?
No, I think you would put them right around Ohio State. It's crazy they got Oregon that high, but Oregon, I would put them ahead of Oregon too. Actually, I really would, because your loss was to Bama. I think Bama would be ahead of Georgia just simply because they beat them. So I think they're right in that middle range, Christian, maybe a 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there if we had a 12, seeded playoff format.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, basically, if this was how it would be, I really wouldn't disagree with it so much because like you said, so Georgia would drop down, and then basically all these teams would move up. So Michigan would move up, Washington would move up, Florida State would move up, Oregon would fall back down. Go ahead.
No. I mean, actually, this is perfect because I think this year would get all the 2-loss teams in, basically, right? Except for like Tulane and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's perfect.
I mean, yeah, because exactly. Because, I mean, like Liberty wouldn't be thrown in there. You know what I mean? In this case, like Liberty would have to do what they did this year, next year. And who knows if that'll happen if they can get Chadwell back. But go ahead.
Right. No, that's a perfect 12 team right there. You got all the 2-loss, 1-loss, and obviously teams with no losses in the playoff. And let them play it out.
I agree with you. Then it just goes into seeding, basically, because, I mean, Michigan moves up, and then Michigan would end up playing like Michigan would probably end up playing like Oklahoma.
Yep.
Right. I mean, I would probably put them around 7 or 8. Just, I would probably put Oregon in that case at 8, Georgia at 7, and then everybody else probably moves up a little bit there. So with that being said, though, I think that would be some interesting games, though, Chris. I'm so excited for next year because at least it matters next year.
I know, man. That's what I said, because like this is heartbreaking regardless whether you're a Georgia, Alabama fan or you hate them both. Both those two teams, I think are still some of the best teams in the country this year, and it sucks that maybe both gets left out. And I know as a college football fan, truly, I just want to watch the best 4 teams play or the best 12 next year. Play it out. You can't debate it then, right? You just got to win on the field. That's what I'm such a big component of that. But you also have to figure in, like this season, the regular season. And I'm going to harp on this Florida State thing. I'm going to be pretty pissed if they don't get into the playoffs today at noon. I think they deserve it. I think what they did, I know they're not the sexiest team, especially without Jordan Travis there. And that offense is obviously going to take a step back because they don't have him at quarterback. But you got to credit what you do in the regular season too. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why they're played. There's a reason why me and you hyped up that LSU Florida State game week 1 of the season. It was a good game. We actually called that game, but man, it just sucks. Cause like I said, I do think Bama's a very good football team. They're probably one of the hottest teams in the country, if not the hottest team in the country right now, up there with Washington.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. Like next year, once the actual 12-team playoff goes into format, there, I don't think it really. Dare I say, I don't think it really matters so much. The 1 to 4 there, right? I mean, yes, it'll be debated, and yes, they'll always be controversial. But hey, you know what I mean? Like at least that way, to me, it puts more pressure on like teams 10 through 12 more than it does anything else. Like.
Christian,
yeah,
I want to ask you a question. If this was a 12-team playoff, it currently constructed like we just mentioned here in front of us, do you think Oregon, a 2-loss team, could beat any one of these top teams?
Yeah.
That's what
I mean, I think Oregon could probably. Well, I'll put it this way: I think Oregon gives you a better shot. You know what I mean? Than Florida State, obviously.
Yeah,
and
I'm just saying. I mean, if you say Oregon had to play Washington for a third time, or had to play Michigan, I would probably lean Michigan over Oregon. But Washington, Oregon again for a third time, man, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. Damn near impossible.
Yeah, yeah, that would be. I would be with it. I mean, and almost you could make an argument there because I mean, Oregon was number 5. You could make an argument they could see each other right in the opening round of that playoff because just depending on what would happen. I mean, they probably wouldn't, but it would probably be like second round of that playoff, But yeah, I would. Oregon would be good. I mean, to see Ohio State again. Ohio State had a really good defense this year. They're a young team. They're going to get They're going to get some pieces back next year. But looking at this year, yeah, like seeing Ohio State, Michigan again, dude. That would be. Oh my god. That would be good. I mean, just seeing some of these rivalry games that that you we're going to see in the playoffs. It just means more.
Yeah, I'll tell you this much. Nobody's talking about Ohio State. They had 1 loss this season by 6 points to Michigan. That's their only loss. I mean, I'm not trying to make a case for Ohio State. I'm not. But I'm just saying, man, they have 1 loss to one of the top 2 teams in the country. And they're not even getting talked about today. So it's just, this is why more than ever it needs to go to a 12-teamer, dude. I truly, truly believe that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And how long, let me just ask you this, Chris, how long until the 12-team playoff isn't enough?
I said that for years when they did the 4-team. I wanted 12. I remember calling my dad 10 years ago. I'm like, they need to make this 12 or 16. I preferably would like a 16 because somebody's going to get a buy out of the 12 deal or however they're going to do that. I think a couple teams are going to have to. I would like 16 because then you could throw in, I know this sounds stupid. This will probably piss some people off, but you could throw in like a Liberty, a team that, or a James Madison if they would have ran the table or somebody like that. I think those teams kind of deserve a chance. We talk about what Central Florida a couple of years ago when Scott Frost was the head coach. They beat Auburn in that bowl game, but Central Florida was a really good team that year. They were. I know you can point and laugh all you want at Central Florida, but
they beat Auburn, who beat Georgia and Bama, who were the two. Both of them basically were in that championship game that came down to the wire there. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And TCU last year, I mean, TCU, nobody was giving TCU a shot to beat Michigan in that opening round last year.
No. That's why Swag's pissing me off with that. Nobody Florida State can't win a first-round game. Really? They said the same thing about TCU last year. Max Duggan wasn't their starting quarterback last year.
Yeah.
Start the season.
I mean, exactly. I mean, now, again, I mean, here's the thing, right? I mean, we kind of saw, who was it? Like Ohio State did it one year, I think, with, was it Cardell Jones?
Third-string quarterback.
And like you said, sometimes all you need is just one good game. That's it. Tate Rodemaker, if they get in the playoffs, all he needs is one game against Washington.
And here's the other thing. Yeah. He gets a month of practice?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I like I said, man, people want to call that shit crazy, fine. But a month of practice with this kid and his wide receivers and the rapport to get it going. And in Florida State, people forget. They do have a really good defense. They do. So I think they can be in a game. And Washington this year has been up and down kind of, Christian. They've won 3 games in a row by 3 points now. Their last 3 games. So I don't think Washington just rolls over Florida State. If Florida State gets in, I don't at all.
No, I think if anything, it would be, to me, it's interesting, right? Because I think Washington has been the feel-good story of the year, out of the Pac-12. We have a lot of Washington fans that watch our show, and their defense has improved. But, I mean, obviously, at some point, I feel like that Cinderella story runs out. you know, whether it be if they have to play Michigan, you know what I mean, for the championship, or they play Bama for a championship, or Texas, or whoever, it's going to run out. I think eventually. I mean, is there any scenario where you see Washington end up winning the championship?
I can. I don't want to leave out that anybody can beat anybody, but
yeah,
Washington, they are a good football team. I think they are. Here's the thing. We talked about it before the show, and it's no different than the NCAA tournament in basketball every year. The teams that have experience, it goes a long ways. You see it with North Carolina, Duke every year. I know those are upper echelon teams if anybody follows basketball, but it's like they always seem to have a one-up because Kansas is another one. Because they've coached there. They've been in there a few times. They understand it. Washington, this will be the first time in a long time that they're playing for, you know, something crazy like this. Washington's a good team. They do have a good quarterback. They do have a good head coach. Like I said, if I had to pick them against Florida State, I would lean Washington, obviously. I think then they obviously would make the national title game. Now, that would come down to Michigan probably. And I think that would be a good football game. I still think Michigan benefited the most yesterday because I think the one or two teams that could beat Michigan might be eliminated this afternoon at noon, being a la Alabama and Georgia.
Well, we're not going to have to wait very long, Chris. I mean,
No.
a couple hours yet, and then we'll get to see somebody will be right, somebody will be wrong.
Absolutely.
One thing I can tell you is, I mean, we're going to be back again on Wednesday, and we've got some content probably will be dropping before then. So, you know, again, this is the fun part of the year where now we get to look at everything and we get to say, hey, you know, did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? You know, obviously we're just two guys in our mom's basement, you know, who love Lamp and just love talking about college football, right?
I love Closet.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So, no, I agree with you, Christian, 100%.
All right, Chris. Well, I'll let you sign us out here then, buddy.
Yeah, like I said, guys, thanks for the support. Thanks for coming on today, Gator Swag. Whoever else is listening, we appreciate it. Like I said, it was a good weekend of college football. There's going to be a lot of topics to talk about this coming week with the transfer portal, bowl games, who's playing who, obviously who's in the playoffs. So like I said, we appreciate it, and we're out.